My name is Jerm. This is Germ Warfare, the battle of ideas.
It's just you and me today. No Mike.
I know, he's deserted us, but only for a couple of weeks, so I think we'll manage, won't we?
If I must, yes. As you can hear, I got a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to ask that you help me out a little bit today.
I'll do my best, and and I think it's going to be interesting to have a different perspective. Obviously, we've recorded just two of us before, and just changing that dynamic a bit will always yield a different result. I think also the other thing to say is, I don't want to overdo it, but the fact that Mike is just able to have a bit of time off is fantastic. You know, I'm very, very pleased for him that he has got a couple of weeks off, which is terrific, and I'm sure will do him a lot of good.
So I said to you that last week I had some talking points which we didn't get to at all, and that's the nature of casual banter.
That is,
and we'll try and get to those talking points today. Just you and I. Is it you and me or you and I? I never know, Charles. You speak the Queen's English.
It would be, in that context, you and me. The easiest way to do that, whether it's me or I, is just to take out the other word. So you wouldn't say it's just I. You would say it's just me. So if you're adding somebody else, then you and me. That's I think the simplest way to make sure you nail it every time.
Just quickly on that, I read last week why the Americans have changed the English language, and I didn't know the answer, and it's absolutely fascinating. Let me first ask you, do you know why?
Sorry, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean over
like
time?
Spelling and words and things.
See.
So like they don't say Z, they say Z, and they spell color without the U, for example, and night without a K. I mean without a G.
They spell what without a G?
Night, as in night time, NITE. So there's no H either, I beg your pardon. No, I think it's correct. Did you not know that?
I have to check. No, I mean, I've definitely seen NITE written like that, but I think that's that is just I don't know if slang's quite the right word for it. Anyway, let's not get bogged down there.
Well, I'll just tell you quickly, just very interesting trivia. So you've heard of the Webster Dictionary? Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
It was because of him. He decided that he wanted to create a variation of English to show that this new country was a breakaway from the British Empire.
Okay.
How's that?
Well, I think in some ways that's quite appropriate. If it really is distinctly different. I remember, I remember a discussion in an actually totally unrelated subject, a class at school, in which somebody who was teaching me at that point said that and I know you can't really be generic about this, but he said that he suggested that the modern day American accent is similar to how people would have been speaking in England several hundred years prior. Now, I don't know how one ever knows that could be the case or not, but I just thought it was an interesting one, because we really have no idea. And even now, you listen to, if you watch, in fact, especially people speaking English in your part of the world,
it's also quite bastardized. Yeah, it's bastardized.
Well, no, it is. But no, what I was going to say was, if you look back at any recorded footage of somebody from I would say Southern Africa, I don't just mean South Africa, but say from Rhodesia or wherever, from 60, 70 years ago, the way they speak English is completely different from how people speak now. And you see that all the way, the whole of the English-speaking world, I would have said, has undergoes constant transformation in terms of intonation. I mean, some of it, what the drivers for that are fascinating. Obviously, a lot of it comes from what's described as popular culture, and some of it doesn't. Some of it, I don't know. I don't know why people do change in the way they speak languages, but it is totally fascinating.
Well, okay, so you are correct. Hold on, you are correct.
Okay, go on. Yeah, go on. Go on.
No, the spelling of night, it's considered, it's recognized in American English, but it is not considered standard. So I beg your pardon, you are correct in that one.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's certainly not a competition, but. Yeah, it is very curious. Sorry, what I was wanting to interrupt with, just only because I don't want to forget it, is that there is to my mind, and I don't want to spoil it, very, very funny video of I think really it was, I don't know if it was a whole play, but it's been cut into a short, I don't know, what is it, sort of 4-minute video of all those sorts of transitions that you're talking about, of how America was going to choose to be different in using a sort of hybrid of some imperial measurements, but some metric. And anyway, what I will do is when this goes out, I'll put the link to the video in the notes, because it's highly, highly amusing. It's very funny, but it just does very well of, why, and we're talking about exactly the same things, but they're different. And I think that is, I have no issue with that at all. I really don't. I mean, America is a very, very long way from the United Kingdom. And of course, it's far closer today than it was at that time. So I've got no dramas with different spellings. And also the whole idea, I know with all the sort of academic furore that's been going on over this chap, Jason Arday in the UK, and the problems that people have with academia. I know this is a controversial thing to be saying, but the whole idea of spelling...
We don't do controversy here, Charles.
No, we don't, do we? That's right. But the spelling is it's a funny one. I absolutely would follow the sort of protocol that spelling matters because it avoids confusion. So, for example, the mistaking desert for dessert is easily done if you spell one differently. That there's obvious confusion there. But otherwise, the idea of spelling being an exact science is curious because, of course, we all speak differently. So a word that I would pronounce in a certain way will sound different to exactly the same word that you might say, and therefore spelling is a funny one in the way that it actually represents a whole raft of different sounds when the whole point of it was that it was meant to be, in the first instance, it was meant to be a transliteration. It was meant to be a way of creating those sounds. Now that's not really what it does now. So but I think what you're talking about is that Webster. So you say, sorry, was Webster American?
Yes. So
is that what you mean?
So his goal was to try and change the English language a little bit so that it wasn't completely reliant on the British way of speaking. They just wanted to have some distinguishable differences. But you didn't need to do that by design. South African English, for example, there was never an attempt to change the way we speak. It just happened organically. And I think because of the Afrikaners and the Boers and then all the other Europeans that were here, I know that I sound silly when I speak English, and I love the actual British English. I think that's the most beautiful sounding way of speaking English. But I can't change the way I speak. It just is. And we don't.
I would say nor should you. I certainly don't think you sound silly. I don't think South Africans. I don't think anyone sounds silly speaking English.
But there are the ways in which we speak. So, for example, the South African English is more guttural than British English because of Afrikaans, and as a result, we've also abandoned many words. In English, and we've completely swapped them out for Afrikaans words like barbecue. That's not part of our lexicon. We simply don't use the word barbecue. So I have to constantly think about what the English version of that word is if I'm discussing a barbecue. As you know, we say the word braai.
But I think that completely makes sense. And in fact, English, I mean, one of the reasons English the English language has so many more words in it than any other is because it is acquisitive. I don't think that I'm on thin ice, but I don't imagine that barbecue is originally an English word.
A lot of English words aren't
many.
English.
That's what I mean. There's so many are pulled in from elsewhere. Or
Latin and French and whatever else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, and then certainly from the colonial period or the period of expansionism or exploration or whatever, an awful lot of words come in from all parts of the world and just assumed to be English, but they're not.
Charles, I could talk about this. I could talk about this for hours. I find it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, so do I.
One of the things that I would love to know is the origins of, not the origins, but the evolution of accents and how that occurs. Even in a small geographical region like England. I mean, England fits into a tiny part of South Africa, and you have this diverse array of accents. I think even within London, I would imagine you have different accents. And I wish I understood. Hey, what's that?
Yeah, no, you're totally correct. But I mean, this is the thing. The tragedy is that there is a sort of bleeding into or homogenization of all these languages. They were really distinct, and yes, completely London. Well, I mean, that was the whole point of Pygmalion, or what was turned into My Fair Lady, was how you could pinpoint somebody to a very, very small geographical
from a peasant class, and it was class-based, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, not sort of yes and no, but yeah, in that instance, yes. And that can be said across all the regions as well. Just which side of a particular river that somebody lived, there would be slightly different words or a very slight different sort of intonation. But yeah, no, I don't know if it, whether the situation in the United Kingdom is vastly different from, say, France. I don't know, because again, this is where the Brits are terrible ability for speaking other languages. I think most people go into France, it's just they all speak foreign, and you don't understand what they say anyway. So to be able to distinguish between the type of French that's spoken in the north versus the south, or in Paris, or in the regions, I think the majority of people wouldn't be able to do. But if you ask the French, they will absolutely be able to say that people speak very, very different. But in terms of the language they use, the words they use, but also their accent. So, but I don't know. Yes, I mean, obviously we're a smaller landmass. Perhaps we do have greater distinctions and differences. I'm not really sure. I rather suspect it's possible, because a lot of it, if you look at a map of the British Isles and you look at where the ports are, this is not only the case, but the port cities, port towns were obvious places that language would be disrupted because of the trade that was done with people, elsewhere, either incoming or outgoing. And so that sort of explains quite a bit of it, but certainly not the more rural sort of inland part. But yeah, no, I mean, gosh, we could go on for hours. There's some very good books. I'm read any of them for a while, but Michael Frayn's book, the title of which I forget, is good. Bill Bryson's book on
he's great.
Yeah, his but no, I don't mean his travels. His book about the English language, mother tongue, and the sort of where it comes from. It's a totally fascinating study. Just any languages and all, but English in particular, and the Proto-Indo-European languages. There's a hell of a lot there, and how that fits into who we are and where we've come from, and all the other bizarre mysteries out there.
Well, Charles, I'm going to practice my Queen's English. Or do you still say that, or should I say King's English these days? I don't know what the correct protocol is.
Well, I suppose you should. I'm not sure that he can really claim it as his own, but
all right, then yeah, I'll say Queen's English.
Yeah,
but I'm going to practice
English,
my Queen's English. I'm going to practice my Queen's English. Why? Because I'm going to be on your side of the world in the middle of September.
Yes, you are.
I'm coming to the 20th anniversary event.
And we are very excited about that. Well, about the event.
As am I.
The whole thing. But definitely having you over here is going to be absolutely tip-top. Yeah. Your first time, I think, is that right?
It's my first time. My first time to the UK, so I'm going to have to come back with my family. So this time will be a little bit truncated because at the same time, my second child is being born.
Yeah. These things, yeah.
So it's a bit of an in and out
ideal time. Yeah. Yes, but what a time. And I think what have you got? A couple of days either side. So
yes, not much. I'm basically going to be spending most of my time in Plymouth and then in London. That's that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if you are going to dip your toe for a brief moment, then well, certainly you couldn't do any better than coming to a UK column event. But to see London a little bit and Plymouth and that part of the coast and the sort of the splendour of Plymouth's history and the views and all that kind of thing, I think it's an absolutely great start. And actually with your coastal eye, it's very different, but I think you'll see the view, particularly from the Hoe up at the top of Plymouth, looking out over the Sound. I think you'll get a little bit of a sense of home from that. It's completely splendid on a smaller scale, but it is lovely.
So I'm looking forward to it very much. And the last time I was overseas, the last few times I've been overseas, I've been in countries where English is not the first language. My wife and I were in France a few years ago, and we were advised. I don't know if this is just a wives' tale or not, but the whole thing about speaking to people first in English or an attempt at French that determines the way in which you're going to get a response. So we spoke to people in Afrikaans, and then they would respond by going, sorry, no, English. So that was our strategy.
That's probably quite a good one. Yeah.
And obviously I was in China, and that I don't understand, so I had to use Google Translate. And then I was also in Amsterdam, but that's interesting. I can kind of pick up what they're saying.
Can you? Okay, that is interesting. I remember and the other way around. Are you understood?
They can. Well, it's funny. So speaking of class structure earlier with languages, the Dutch see Afrikaans as like a peasant variation of Dutch. We use the kitchen Dutch, as it were.
Okay. Yeah.
Despite the fact that it's a completely evolved language.
Yeah.
But yes, my wife understands Dutch a lot better than I do. I have to slow everything down in my head so that I can follow. But she can follow to a large degree. But the language is quite separate. They're not the same anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, anyway, you'll have lots to observe, lots to think about, especially coming from where you do, just to see the terrific differences between our two countries, not just the way they look, but the
and I
people
need to come
that are there and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
And I need to come and see my colonial masters.
Yeah, well, that's not quite how I was going to put it, but yeah, I suppose there is that element. Yeah, well, this would be it. I'd be fascinated, and we will obviously what we will do is we'll record one of these sessions, at least one of these sessions, whilst you're with us, and I think that will be completely fascinating, just to get your hot take on how you see things, how you see relationships between people, and all. I mean, you've talked about sort of class, the idea of class, and what that means, either historically or to you now, or how your society functions, where the divides or the breaks are, if there are perceived to be any, and how you'll perceive that in the United Kingdom today, because that is something that still gets spoken about a lot, as though it is a divisive issue, but I would say it's much, much harder to pin down now exactly what it means.
I wouldn't say it's divisive. I mean, it's part of human history. It is what it is, and you see it everywhere across the world. But there is a kind of forced segue here. which is immigration. And I want to just chat a bit about that. I won't say that colonialism is immigration. It's obviously different. But there is an immigration issue that's happening on your side of the world. And in fact, on our side too. I mean, I would argue everywhere, actually. I mean, we've had huge protests recently. And I won't very quickly say that they were organic. I think there's a lot of foreign interest in creating disruption and chaos, because immigrants are not necessarily the problem. It's the policy structure, the frameworks that seem to be the problem. Look at China, Charles. They don't have a mass immigration problem. Why? Because they've got a framework in place that is quite protective of their borders. Europe, on the other hand, doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. I think we can't disregard the context, the history, and in fact, I would say that we do have to go back to the colonial period, because in actual fact, the way in which people were moved. I mean, crikey, we're going back to I would say even Egyptian, back to the sort of dominance of Egypt, or especially Greek and Roman times. The movement of people, the movement of labor, has always been a sort of colonial policy, more than a policy. I mean, it's actually driven the ability to be able to do this. Look at Africa as a prime example. The railways were the product of imported labor from South Asia, so it's been part and parcel of the economic development, supposedly, for certainly all of our recent history. But I think it's what's changed and why, and what the intent is, because there are still, there certainly are still places where there are movements of people towards labour in much the way that there has been. But I would say that those instances are not the norm anymore. And looking at Europe in particular, the pendulum has completely swung the other way. It's very hard to get sufficient detail on this, but a lot of migration has changed drastically, in that because people are not necessarily moving specifically for economic reasons, that the idea that there is a massive uptick in irregular migration, so people who are coming either to claim asylum or to be in a particular country but under the radar, that again is a massively changing picture. But I don't think we can look at that separately from what I've just been talking about.
Well, what I'm kind of alluding to is, if we talk about mass immigration in Europe in our circles, I don't know about you, but almost always there will be it's the Muslims. Now, I'm not a Muslim, and I have no interest in becoming a Muslim, but I don't have a dog in this fight. What I am thinking about here is blaming Muslims seems to be a little bit of a distraction, because if there was tighter border control or tighter not foreign policy, but immigration policy across the European region, you wouldn't find this, would you? Otherwise, you could say the same thing about people going into China, which is not happening.
Well, hang on. What do you mean? Do you mean that you wouldn't?
So what happens what I'm saying is that when people go, it's the Muslims, they completely ignore the geopolitical agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually a lot more than that is ignored, and I think one of the things, speaking specifically about the United Kingdom, yes, of course, it's observable, and it is. It can be clearly evidenced in statistics that the population of people from different parts of the world has changed pretty drastically.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, yeah, sorry for jumping, but yeah, it says 19% of the UK's population was foreign born by June 2024, which is up 16%. And it says, yeah, as of 2021, 2022, around 11 million people living in the UK were born abroad. That's a lot of people.
It is, and it is absolutely a heck of a lot. So I'm absolutely not seeking to downplay that at all. But I think there's just, there is there's rather more to it, and I think it's a lot of the concern around it is amplified in a way that is frankly unhelpful. And I think that's my point, via sort of cherry picking, because just, let's say statistically, if you do look at those statistics and you look at the massive spikes, let's say from Ukraine and Hong Kong, why does nobody really have any concern about that? Those numbers of people are vast. So, potentially there's a huge effect to be felt there, because they are either they're doing one of two things. Either those people will be, to use the sort of the wearied phrase, they will be taking our jobs, or they will be feeding off the state, i.e. they will be paid for by taxpayers' money. Now that is the charge that is mostly levelled at the irregular migrants. Now, totally well-founded concern. It can't be ignored that there are significant numbers of people coming in, largely across the channel in boats, and the concern is manifold, not least because a lot of these people, a very high percentage of them, are young men, and there's concern about that, and there have been sufficient number of incidents for people to have heightened concern about the way in which these people are sort of absorbed by society. In fact, then, the honest point is that, well, they're not absorbed. They're sort of kettled or contained in places that they really shouldn't be. So the whole situation is managed very poorly. Now, why does that happen, and why is it allowed to continue to happen? And this is why I do prefix this with the colonial piece about moving labour, because that has absolutely turned full circle, in that an awful lot of these places that became former colonies and have then become sort of places that are scrapped over. If you look at where people have come from, West Asia or Northeast Africa, these are all war-torn regions, and they are absolutely places that we have created the war-torn nature, either directly or indirectly. I think in most cases directly. So it's no great surprise that if you then set the conditions in the home country that are favourable to these people coming in, by which they know that they will be looked after, that the state will take care of them, and that all they have to do is arrive, then it's not difficult to see how that word gets back, and then in effect a sort of trade route is established where people are able to travel. And I'm not, I think we have to be very careful to consider exactly who these people are. It's very easy to create short sort of video clips of young men in such a way that they look menacing, they look like they're going to cause trouble. You look at what's happening in Northwest Africa recently. It's very easy to make that look like a massive problem, and that the people that are doing it are the problem, when in actual fact,
it's rage bait.
Yeah, it completely is. It absolutely is. But I think the way I look at it, from the United Kingdom's point of view, is that this is all part of a bigger problem, because it's not just it is not just irregular migrants who are taking advantage of the system. And I've made this point before, and it is easy to be sort of misconstrued, but the bigger welfare state absolutely does this for people who are native British as well. People are, in a lot of cases, they're presented with the choice as to whether they would like to work for a living or not, and those that don't are paid for by those that do. So the sense of sort of unfairness and menace and whatnot is not presenting an honest picture to say that the problem is these migrants, irregular migrants who are coming in from elsewhere. That is absolutely not the only problem. And numerically, it just doesn't stack up. It cannot be the problem. And further, the idea that in amongst all of these people, and okay, I don't want to confuse by talking about people who are now not irregular migrants, but the idea that sort of that Islam again is the problem. I think part of my issue with that is that statistically, I don't understand why that is perceived to be the problem. There are concentrations. There are absolutely concentrations in particular places, and this is where it should not have been allowed to have happened, I think. But there are concentrations of Muslim populations where, yes, indeed, to live a life in the way that you would have been accustomed for years and years and years is now not possible. I absolutely don't dismiss that. Yeah, go on.
It obviously is a problem, Charles. If it's not part of the organic nature of that area, I don't think anybody can claim that. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're changing something that has been around. I get that, but
sorry, just to finish. Can I just finish the point? Because the point is that what I do take issue with is the suggestion that just because there is a different cultural influence, or there is a different culture in existence, that de facto threatens British culture. I don't see, and this is why it's so interesting to talk to you about it. Any South African city will have a population of Asians, it will have a population of white people, it will have a majority population of black people. Now, do black South Africans really feel threatened by the South Asian culture that might be there, or indeed by the white population culture that might be there? I don't think so.
Very, very good question. There have been numerous conversations around that exact question in the past year. So I would answer that by saying, Charles, no, that nobody is seen as a threat if you are kind of assimilated and you have adopted quote unquote South African culture, whatever that might mean. But I think that threat comes in when you feel that your cultural hegemony is going to become a minority. That's what I think. So in other words, does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I think that is exactly that is what is seized upon in the UK. And again, this is I have to keep saying this because I know how sensitive a subject this is. I don't dismiss any of what it is that people are concerned about where there is legitimate cause for concern. So in those places where there are populations they don't have to be Muslim, but perhaps typically they are, or they are from the Horn of Africa, and you will go to an area in a city or a town, and there is nothing about that place that seems British anymore. So those people are not doing what you're talking about. They're not coming to a new country and adopting anything from that country. But I think still the question remains, even if there is that concentration, does that, apart from the displacement that it's already had on that particular locality, does that actually threaten British culture? Why should that stop British people from feeling British if you're outside of that area? I think that's the bit that people are, I would say, a bit inconsistent on.
But that's interesting because that does kind of point to that question I asked you quite a long time ago: is what does it mean to be British?
Yeah, well, there you go. This is an absolutely great question, because I think nowadays it is a bit more difficult to define that, and I'm not sure how people do think of it. I mean, because again, you see it on social media the entire time. I saw just a couple of days ago, a map of the number of mosques that are in the UK now as compared with the number of mosques that were in the UK in 1950. And okay, these maps are always, they never really paint the right picture, because just simply the symbol for the mosque is so much bigger than it should be. So it gives the impression they're absolutely everywhere. Again, not to belittle the change. There has quite clearly been an absolutely monumental change since 1950. But the idea, sorry, is that me? The idea that that somehow, sorry, there's a beeping going on.
That's fine. I can't hear it.
Okay, good. The idea that that in itself is a threat to, I don't know what, Britishness, or more particularly Christianity, is to me nonsensical. Because if you have a bedrock of Britishness, or indeed Christianity, and something else comes in alongside that, then why should that be deemed to be either fundamentally changing the character of whatever already exists, or it should be considered to be a threat to it? So again, the refrain is always that mosques are taking over churches, as though Muslims somehow are almost turning up to the church and sort of taking it by force, or convincing people to forget Christianity or whatever. And that is absolutely not a true picture. And I can say that for a fact, having been a churchgoer my entire life. I have watched church congregations absolutely fall apart, and that is nothing to do with Islam or immigration. That is everything to do with a shift. I'm not going to call it a breakdown, even though that's how I might perceive it. But that is fundamentally a shift in the way in which British families, I would say, have conducted themselves. And this goes alongside a whole load of other stuff. And this, people will make of this what they will. But for example, the divorce rate, the teenage pregnancy rate, all these societal indicators that things are changing. So I'm not necessarily going to say all of this is bad, but when you look at the complete picture, there has been a very, very marked shift. Now, when you have such a change and then you say, well, look here, there are pockets or concentrations of, say, Sudanese people or Somalis or Pakistani Muslims or whatever they are, then yes, I can see how putting those two things alongside each other makes it look like one has caused the other. I'm afraid to say, I don't think that one has caused the other. I think that the watering down, let's say, of Britishness, British culture, societal cohesion has allowed the other one to assume a disproportionate sort of dominance, let's say, or not disproportionate dominance, a dominance that I think would have been absorbed had Britishness, British culture been more cohesive over that period of time. That might be I'm sure that has to necessarily be a simplistic way to look at it, because it's a generalization. You'd have to go, in order to be to be giving due regard to the places that are of specific concern, you'd have to look at every single one and analyze those factors. But I think by and large, as a sort of whole of society piece, that's what I see. Look at my generation. And again, I'm not advocating for saying, people should be doing this, but two big things: people did not go to church, and people did not join the armed forces in the way that they used to. So this idea that that people were sort of absolutely there for Queen and country and whatever. I mean, I know that's let's say out of date, but I mean, it cannot be a coincidence that has led into the situation that we're in now. And yes, of course, I'm totally accepting that there has been a very sort of well articulated and well driven policy to make all this happen.
You raise, I think, some very, very good points. And going back to the comment earlier that I made about people blaming Muslims as a low-hanging fruit, I'll give you a parallel example of where I think that complexity comes in. So here in South Africa, we've got a big issue with rhino horn poaching, right? And it really is a big problem. It can send the rhinos to extinction because there aren't that many rhino. But is it black rhino? Black rhinos, I think it is. Left, and so they have to be cared for behind fences, basically. And it's easy to look at the poachers themselves and just keep blaming them, but they are endless. They're like ants, because anybody who's willing to get funded, just about, who's in that kind of industry, will take the job, as dangerous as what it is. And they are the problem. If you catch a guy who's torturing a rhino, I mean, they are savage, right? They don't kill the rhinos. It's horrible. That is a problem, and you need to deal with that guy. But he's not the root of the problem, and he's just the symptom. And that's kind of what I'm alluding to. So the It's the Muslims narrative is treating a symptom, and you were suggesting that it's a lot more complex than that.
I think it is a lot more complex, and I think also there's this idea of consistency, or at least are we being consistent? Because the reason that the main reason that Islam has been a very easy one to demonize is because people have been able to point to the radicalization of that faith, or of people who are supposedly of that faith, and how associated with that there have been specific crimes, mostly sexual abuse or sort of honor crimes. It depends who the victims have been, but because there are well documented instances of horrific crimes having taken place, and the perpetrators have been exclusively gangs of mostly Pakistani Muslims, it's as though that is what they do. That is sort of what they're all about. That is why they come saying, to the... Yeah.
Sorry, Charles, but let me just quickly add to what you're saying. That's like saying, well, majority of the farm attacks that happen here in South Africa are by black people, so therefore black people are violent.
Well, there is that, but and I think that's a very good point to make. And I think there's basically just sadly, a lot of people, a refusal to accept that if that sort of behavior is happening, then they are not cleaving to the Islamic faith. There is, people will say what they like about the distortion of some parts of the Quran in order to make it look like all of this is what they're supposed to do. That is not true. But it is absolutely true that there are deliberate efforts to radicalize, to create radical parts of Islam, or at least to change the nature of it, in order that people are recruited, in order that societal disharmony is created. That is absolutely a thing. But to say that does not mean that Islam is bad. And again, the thing I would always say is, for anyone who doubts me, just go to a majority Muslim country and just see how you get treated. And
that's my point. And nobody can answer that.
No, I know, and that is a thing. I mean, if anyone listening now has had sort of a bad experience in a Muslim country, well, okay, that is obviously statistically possible. Bad things happen in all countries, but by and large, the hospitality and kindness offered by Muslim people to anyone else is, to my mind, quite astonishing. I've been to a lot of those places, and it's amazing. But that's part of it. But sorry, on the consistency side of it, why is that one thing seized upon? It is horrific. The idea of sexual abuse, particularly of sort of young girls, absolutely horrific. But why should any other type of crime by any other ethnicity or nationality be ignored? Ukraine, prior to 2022, was regarded as one of the most corrupt countries on earth, and is still one of the most corrupted countries on earth, despite the sort of BBC whitewash. So with an influx of however many 100,000 Ukrainians, is it really the case that they are all squeaky clean and they've mended their ways and they've adopted the British way of life? No, I don't think that can be the case at all. Do I have statistical evidence to back up the point that I'm in effect trying to make, which is that it's likely that with the influx of Ukrainian people, quite a lot of Ukrainian crime, let's call it that, will have come over with them. But that's never looked at. So I do think there is an inconsistency. And what troubles me about that is that it in a way, it absolutely plays into the hands of those who seek to disrupt. Because then what do? You create these divides. You create the idea that Islam or Muslim people are the enemy, which means that they then realize that they're regarded as being othered, or they're outside, whatever. And straight away, you've got your friction, you've got your tension, you've got your societal divide, and then the whole thing escalates and perpetuates. So it's a total gift, which again is not. I'm not at all saying that if there is criminal behaviour, if there is behaviour that is not appropriate, that it should be tolerated. Of course it shouldn't, but nor should it be from people who are British born and bred. And again, I know broken record and all that, but it was a short time, but I have spent time policing within a culture that absolutely includes those
Charles.
People we've been talking about, and includes a lot of British
government
people.
Agent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and having seen that at first hand, I can absolutely say that that born and bred Brits are every bit as bad as what it is people are imagining that that those from elsewhere have been up to.
Yeah, I want to point out something. There is a huge disconnect, particularly in the kind of space that we find ourselves in, which is media. And alternative independent media is no different in many ways to mainstream media, because perceptions are created. Now, I would go as far as saying that the average person, Charles, is actually a decent person, regardless of being a Jew or a Muslim or a black or white or Chinese. And I would go as far as saying that everybody can live fine alongside everybody else. The problem in many ways I have found is when you have a top-down imposition of something or other that creates a conflict. And that's what we're seeing with the immigration. That is not organic, what's going on in Europe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, sorry. So the things that I'm saying are not that they are beside what it is you're talking about. Is it therefore right that such a policy should be pushed, that people should be forced into countries in order to disrupt any sense of homogeneity? No, that is not appropriate. But then this goes, this is traced back for hundreds of years, and the person that people always point to is Kalergi. I can't remember the second part of his name.
Yes, the Kalergi plan, yeah.
Well, yeah, but you see but you go back and you look at the context. Written the writings that I think are most seized upon were written in 1925, at a time where Europe had been through yet another horrific and protracted war, and the centuries before that within Europe were characterized by the then countries of Europe taking chunks out of each other forever and ever. So his premise was, well, if those countries aren't considered to be so starkly divided on sort of lines of ethnicity or nationality, sort of nationalistic tendencies, let's say, then warfare would be less prevalent. Now, whether that's right, whether that's wrong, whether that really is exactly what he was thinking, and whether his motivation was as he sort of said it would be, okay, we're never really going to know, perhaps. But the point is that was the theory, the idea. Ironically, that was the theory, because of course what we're suggesting now is that the opposite is true. if you do water down a particular population, then really all you're doing is, whilst you might be stopping Belgium from fighting France, you're simply moving the conflict to within that border area, and that is what looks like it's going to be happening certainly within the United Kingdom. It looks like we are being absolutely pushed towards civil war.
If you want to see what Europe could look like in 20 years' time, look at South Africa. So I love living here, and I would argue, and I have argued, that race relations are by and large fine. It is what it is. We are a manglemush. We are a multicultural failure in many ways, right? But we are what we are, and it kind of fumbles and bumbles its way along. Now, that doesn't mean that every other region of the world should copy and do the same sort of thing, because there is something to be said, Charles, about nation states. And a nation state generally comes from the word nation, and a nation tends to have a very specific kind of meaning, which doesn't really include people who are outside of that, what's the word I'm looking for, that sort of cultural identity, ethnic identity. There is something about it. It's not a racist thing to say. It just, the Chinese
I know, but yeah, go on.
No, well, I'm going to say the Chinese are mostly Han Chinese. It's a particular kind of homogenous, what's the word? I'm struggling with words here. There's a homogenous
totally
flow
agree.
in China. Yeah.
Well, that's such an interesting point, because yes, it is now, but if you read what people have written about China over hundreds of years, but China to us, I think from the outside, looks like it is exactly what we're sort of ruining has gone, certainly from a lot of Western European countries, which is this idea of a sort of single, united Chinese society. But the only reason that's come about is because of the march of the Mandarin language and Han Chinese people who have, in the words of sort of critics, have effectively ethnically displaced all the others that were there. So it just depends, what do we really mean by this? And going back to your point about accents, different regional accents in the United Kingdom, it wasn't that long ago before the first thing that mattered beyond family was people in your immediate vicinity. If you go back far enough, and actually all the warfare was not between Britain and France, it was between the various kingdoms that existed within what is Great Britain. So it's we're always talking about the same thing, but we're just looking at it on a different scale as things have evolved over time. So I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily can agree with you in looking at China and seeing that it's a model that we should aspire to, because I think it is a reasonable position to take that has only come about because everything else in China has been displaced. This is really something that I would defer to Carl about. Of course I would, but the idea that that's what everyone in China wanted. Again, always tricky territory, but just look at Tibet. Yeah, I don't know. Again, that's not to say I'm advocating for there being enforced differences, but it's a complicated picture. But so then what do we say?
Let me help you, because I've thought about this a lot over the years. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with multiculturalism or any of those things, right? If they're organic.
Yeah.
If it's forced or top-down imposed or artificial, then there are lots of problems. It's the same thing as somebody telling me who I should be friends with, as opposed to me being friends with somebody just because we get on well.
Yes. Yeah, but you see, this is it. I think a lot of people would have said of China that it absolutely has been enforced. That apparent homogeneity has been enforced. So I think it's difficult to use that as an example. Yeah, we do, and again, how does one really ever know? How do you when you're looking back beyond sort of lifetime experience, and even if it is, I could have a conversation with somebody in the next 20 minutes and say, so tell me, in your mind, what happened in 2020? Oh, well, there was a massive spike in deaths because there was a new illness and, it absolutely ravaged the world and this, that and the other. Well, that is somebody who thinks they saw that with their own eyes. I would fundamentally disagree with it. So
I also didn't see that.
No, exactly. So then when you look back, going back through historical records, how on earth do you ever ascribe credibility to any one theory about anything? You can observe the changes, but to understand exactly why those changes happened, as in, the 2020 thing, yes, we all saw the spikes in the mortality charts. We just come up with different explanations as to why that was the case. And it's the same thing looking backwards. So, what I'm saying, I believe to be the case about the movement of Han Chinese as being sort of not organic. Well, I can't say that for sure. So it is very problematic, and we apply that absolutely to the current moment where. So what are we saying? That there is possibly a sort of well coordinated plan by I don't know. I mean, what, this sort of the Islamic faith, or by Muslims to actually colonize the United Kingdom? Is that credible? I don't know.
It could be, but I always look at it from the perspective of if it's organic or artificial. So here where we live on a farm, and there are about 50 homes on this farm, and people choose to come and live here. And as a result, it's organic. Nobody has been put here. However, were somebody put here into one of these homes and then came into the community and tried to, poke and prod, that would be different. And that would end up causing conflict. And then you have to ask questions, what's going on here? And that's the difference between organic and artificial. My best friend for 20 years was Indian. Now, here in South Africa, that matters because we are a very racially aware country because of our history. But the reason why we became best friends is because we got on well with everything, and nobody forced us to be best friends. And so for me, what I'm saying to you is that I don't mind at all who is around. What I do mind is if there's an agenda going on, and I think what's going on your side of the world is very agenda driven, because as you pointed out, go to Oman or go to the UAE or go to one of those countries and you'll see it's very peaceful, very safe. Mm-hmm. My family member was just here over the weekend and he just got back from Oman. He said it's incredible.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Oman actually is the sort of standout example. It's completely extraordinary. But then again, Oman, I mean, in effect, a dictatorship will be the counter.
Well, it doesn't matter.
No, exactly. But this is the thing. Or does it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So no, I mean, it is a terrifically complicated picture. But just going back to your friendship, you see that is fascinating. But then, how could that friendship be altered if there were then inorganic stoking of tensions between communities, and then suddenly you find that you are each you belong to supposedly a group that is meant to be in conflict with
COVID
another.
Broke us. Yeah, COVID broke that friendship.
Okay.
And everything that came with it. And I'm not alone. I know that a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah,
families were disrupted.
Yeah. Yes, you see, that's fascinating because that's different. I mean, that is along a sort of belief or humanity line, but nonetheless, it is a difference. It is absolutely a break, and yet with whether it's skin color or ethnicity or even language, that's not something that you have a choice over. So it's very much easier to to create those divisions and to do it on a sort of macro scale. So I think I would just I just have to hope that people are able to resist the benefits that are derived from divide and rule, because that's what that we haven't actually talked about that. Yes, and I know we're winding up, but that is basically what this is about. So the moment you start to say that, Islam is the problem or Pakistani Muslims are the problem, and you put the whole lot of them into that one category, you are creating a tension there that is absolutely, first of all, preventing people from getting on. And getting on, I don't just mean getting on in a sort of relationship way, but I mean getting on with the business of creating a functioning and profitable sort of booming society. You're actively frustrating that, but also you are creating this enormous chasm which is just manipulated for the good of none of those people. And so that's the bit that people have got to see through, which again has to be put to one side. I mean, that is not to dismiss what has absolutely been observable in many parts of the UK, which is where a population, a non-British population, has come in and utterly transformed that area. And like you say, that's not been organic.
And I'll add to that by giving you an example from here. So we have a very, very big shall we say, taxi industry, and it's huge because our public transport infrastructure is pretty bad. So taking trains and buses are generally not very good. So there's a huge sort of domestic taxi industry, and Uber doesn't fall into that category. And most Uber drivers that I've driven with are not South African. They are from Malawi or from Congo or from Zimbabwe. And every time I get into a conversation with them and I ask them what it's like, they say it's not good. They get targeted. They have to remove their phones and their devices because the domestic taxi industry drivers see them and they know who they are. And so they target them. When I say target, I mean they literally will hit them off the road, or they'll shoot at them or something like that. And it's quite dangerous. And that is a tension that I believe has been created externally. I don't think that's an organic tension.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you. And that I mean, there you go. That's absolutely case in point. That is frustrating everybody, really. What good comes of that?
No, I was trying to think of a joke to close this conversation about me coming to the UK. And I've got it worked out in my head, but I can't quite put it into words. But it goes something along these lines. So, because of the huge South African expat population in the UK, I'm trying to help me on this one. I'll try and refine it for our next banter. But I want to make a joke about not really going to the UK, just going to another province of South Africa.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, right with you. Yeah. Yeah, okay. That might
anyway. There's a joke in there somewhere.
Finessing, yeah, there will be. There absolutely will be. We'll get to it next week.
Charles, I'll catch up with you next week.
Yeah, okay, bro. Thanks, Jerm.
If you're enjoying this program, you can help us bring more news, articles, comment and interviews to more people. It's your support that makes our coverage possible. Our goal for 2026 is for 10,000 new members. Join a worldwide community of UK Column supporters on our website or alternatively on Substack or YouTube.